Kia ora and hello, friends. Welcome back to the Restoring Connections podcast. As always, today we are diving into all manner of discussion around healing and strengthening your most important relationships. The relationships that you want to last right through to the end.
That's right.
And I happen to be looking at the person who that's most true of in my life. I have the great privilege of interviewing my darling wife, Cora, today. It's going to be really cool. These podcasts are always centered around four core things: personal responsibility, powerful communication. Oops, I got the order wrong. Personal, it doesn't really matter. They're all equally important. It's personal responsibility, proactive care, powerful communication, and healthy boundaries. These are the things that we have discovered and are discovering all the time.
That's right.
Over and over and over, are the core ingredients of what give a relationship the strength that it needs to be able to get through tough times.
Yeah.
Because it's going to go through tough times.
Yeah. Always.
Of that you can be absolutely sure.
Yeah.
So if you want the relationship to last, it's got to have these elements in it to be able to make it through. Ready to rock?
Ready to rock.
Cool. So today we are, the question we're grappling with is, why would I even try to understand you? Mm-hmm. And yes, I asked it in that exact tone of some degree of exasperation.
Yeah.
You know what that feels like, where you're in a connection. Obviously you care about the relationship, because you're probably not exasperated if you don't care, right? So the exasperation is, some kind of an indicator that this relationship is quite important to you, but you do not understand what in the world is going on with this person who you love, who you care about, or is important to you in some way. And we often talk about we talk about how we think that pain is what really crushes and suffocates a relationship, but it's becoming clearer and clearer to us all the time that what really destroys a connection is confusion, which of course is the opposite of understanding. When you are going through something really painful, but you understand what's going on. Yeah. Like you've got clarity. It's like, okay, my teenager is doing this, or my spouse or my partner or my boss or whatever. I'm experiencing this really awful thing, but I do have some understanding as to what's driving them, why they just did that thing, what I'm going through. We can get through just about anything.
That's right. Yeah.
We're incredibly resilient when it comes to pain. But when we are confused, it is just anathema to the human experience. Yeah. And because we feel totally out of control, we feel lost, and it's a terrible feeling. So understanding is obviously the opposite of that. So the reason I'm interviewing you, my darling, on this is that you are, I would describe you as somewhat of a total Jedi Knight. You've in this area, you've really devoted your whole life, your every waking minute, to developing the arts of being able to understand people.
Yeah.
And it's something that I have benefited from hugely. You're often kind of helping me understand myself.
Sure. Yeah.
Understanding the kids. You're unpacking. You're helping me understand you. So, sometimes I'm sure you would love a little bit of that to come back towards you.
That's all good.
Or if I was as proactive as you are,
sure,
and understanding you as you are of me, and I'm working on that. So why don't we treat this episode like that? Why don't we treat this episode like you training me in the arts of being able to understand people? So I want to start with that question of you, and get you talking about this. The question would be, given how incredibly complex human beings are, you might say infinitely complex, and wonderfully so. Therefore, relationships are doubly infinitely, if you can double infinity, then relationships are doubly infinitely complex.
Yeah.
What gives you, I'm thinking of people listening to this who are just going, why would I even bother? What gives you confidence in your story and your experiences? What gives you confidence that it's even possible to really understand another person? Talk to us about that.
Such a good question. I definitely feel like I need to preface first that thank you. It's very kind of you to think that I do that well. I don't think of me only doing that well. I also think I do it badly sometimes, where there's a sense of pressure I've always felt to know why and to understand why things are the way they are in life. May it be aspects of spirituality or aspects of origin of the world or culture. I'm somebody who always want to understand, but why? Right. But why is it this way? Your natural way. So I think that there's definitely this tendency in my life to ask why a bit too much as well. Right. That's the shadow side of it. So I definitely want to preface, thank you for seeing me and seeing the beauty of it. There's definitely some part of it in my life I've had to work on, because you can't always know why. Right.
Making peace with the mystery. You never arrive.
Yeah, and so that's the other side of it. Making peace with the mystery of why somebody does something that doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but they don't know themselves why they do it, and let it go.
That's a good place to start.
They don't know, and so I think that there's an aspect of it where you have to hold that balance, that tension in that gift of in that natural gift. I have to try to understand why. I'd say I'm naturally really, really curious about people, about the world, about how things work. So because I'm naturally curious, I ask a lot of questions, and I really want to understand how something works.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah.
Surely, therefore, you have had to deal with a lot of discouragement around not being able to understand. You've probably had to overcome, you've probably had to overcome more than most people, the feeling of despair of not being able to understand.
Yeah, or not being understood. That's been like a real big theme
Even
in my
worse.
life. So I think with every gift comes a little bit of a shadow that you need to embrace a little bit.
Sure.
I think it's important to preface that with the reality is there's always a sense of pressure, I feel, to understand people and to understand things. I think where it becomes positive is I ask a lot of questions, and I want to understand how people work. My children would say that's pretty annoying most of the time. And like, stop asking me questions.
Sometimes they love it. Sometimes they love it.
At very key moments has been really important for them. Yeah. And so what I've learned to do over time is to only ask questions when invited. Right. So not be too annoying. But I do think that it starts there. It's really asking questions. So to come back to your questions, circle back to. So can you repeat your question so I can get back on track? I wanted to preface and now I'm looking at my train of thought.
You're modeling it beautifully. So the question is, what gives you confidence that it's even possible to understand someone? Yeah. What are some of your experiences that kind of inject hope?
Yeah, thank you for helping me get it back on track. That's why I wanted to preface is that I think it's a little bit impossible to be absolutely sure to box anyone in. Yeah. I've done a lot of personality tests. I've done a lot of things like that, but I know that those tests are just language tools for me. They're not to box you in, you're like this, you're like that. They're more just, at this very point of your life, this test tells me that this is something I value and it's important to me. And therefore, this is a language tool so I can help my important people know this is what I value. So that's what gives me confidence is that I think I believe with open-mindedness and curiosity and a willingness to hear the other, you can always better understand them. You can always realize something you didn't know about them that now, as you ask certain questions, now you understand better. And that means that there's possibility of better partnership, better connection. So that's what really is my goal in any of the seeking to understand your personality type, or that's my goal is to really better understand someone. So I have confidence it's possible because I've experienced it with you. I've experienced it with my children. I've experienced it with people that I've done a mentor partnership with, where I've mentored or I've guided people, and I've gotten to know them better over time. So therefore I have confidence it's possible.
Right. And what does that feel like? What does it actually feel like for you, kind of, before and after?
Yeah, I guess first of all, I've developed over the years a set of important questions I ask people. That's why we have a mentoring program where I ask very specific questions. Right. So I understand, number one, their story, their narrative, their culture, their idea of the world, how they see the world, what's important to them, what they value, all these questions as we go through the mentoring program. It helps me have a better picture of how to understand them. And so that's the process that I go through, where I the more questions I ask, if they let me and if they invite me into that space safely and with trust, then the more I start, it's like a puzzle. I start seeing parts of the puzzle. There's still things missing, and I think there's always going to be things missing about the person. As I said, we're a very intricate, infinite mystery, and I don't think we can ever work the other person out. But there's pieces of the puzzle where, oh my goodness, that makes sense over there. There's a context that I can start understanding about their lives and what they care about, that helps me have a bit of a picture, and that helps me guide them and understand how to guide them, how to, if someone tells me I really value personal responsibility, taking responsibility for things, tells me that's somebody who's ethical, that's somebody who values integrity, that's somebody who feels like it's important to do what you say. So therefore, if the way I guide them is going to be that way. If I say I'm going to meet with them at this very hour, I'm going to meet with them at this very hour, and I don't cancel 10 minutes before. They're not the type that will appreciate that. So these are the small things that help me give a clear picture of how to guide and how to support and how to understand them.
So what about someone who, like for example, somebody you're married to, just to throw out an example, who hasn't signed up for your mentoring program, and is not saying like, please mentor me, please guide me, but someone you're trying to partner with, someone who hypothetically is doing something that you find really frustrating. Like, do you have experiences where then something goes click, and now you understand, you might not still like the fact that they do that, but does understanding why they do that, it produces something different in the relationship?
Well, so I think we have in our course, we have an online course, Foundations course, and we talk a lot about observing, what makes someone thrive. Right. So I think I do a lot of that, like, with you. I'm just going,
it's so good.
In what way do I see Matthew thrive? Matthew thrive in a place where he can be enthusiastic and happy and excited, and there's something about the spark of life that's really, really natural to you. And
like doing a podcast where we're talking about awesome stuff.
I can see your eyes are like shining, and I can see you're so excited about it. So it gives me confidence that this is the natural way that Matthew thrives. What are the good fruit of Matthew's life? And it's easy to observe and judge. So I try not to judge, but it's easy to observe someone when they're not thriving and to go, that's not feeling good, that's not looking good. But what I try to do in those moments is that we have another point in our course where we say we set rhythms of connection. And what that means is we have a time every week where I can tell you how I'm experiencing you, what's going on that's hard, and then I get to talk about it. Well, last week when you said that, and when you were doing that, I'm just struggling with it. Can we talk about this? I want to tell you how it feels. Can I give you, understanding of what hurts, or are you open to hearing it? And as we talk in those rhythms of connection time of our week, as we talk this thing through, often you do go, there are some things that aren't working for me, and as we talk about it, you start realizing it's often in our conversation you start realizing what doesn't work for you, and what you what you're like or what you're not like, and what you need to realign to,
and ultimately it is my responsibility. But man, we can be so helpful to each other in our close relationship. Well, both are true, right? We can be absolutely awful to each other. We can be incredible, like in the general sense. That the closer two people get together, the more wounding they can be to each other. But the opposite is also true. The more enlightening, that relationship can be in terms of self-discovery. I'm discovering about you, and in my interaction with you, I'm actually discovering more about who I am. And it's like the reinterpretation of those quirky behaviors that we tend to, like you were just doing that this morning. We're having a conversation about somebody we care about really deeply, and who's doing something that we don't judge, but there's from a perspective it's like may or may not be particularly fruitful, and but then you have you tell me, this is something I've just realized though about this person, about their journey, and about what's motivating them, and it completely reorients.
It changes everything.
The way we're actually seeing the situation, and therefore what it might look like to encourage them, to partner with them, because we're coming out of that confusion into a deeper understanding.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's where I really like personality tests.
Yeah. Well, actually, let's go into the next question, which is basically, okay. So I don't think many people on planet Earth are going to go as far as you've gone. Like this is basically your. I'm just going to stick with Jedi Knight. You do this professionally, really. Right. So you're way out in front. For the rest of us, and I include myself in this category, what are some practical things? What are some tools that you've found really helpful for someone who's not going to be doing this professionally, not going to be a professional mentor or coach, but really wants to understand their partner better or their child better? Talk to us about some of the tools that you have found really helpful.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning, for me, personality tests are not about boxing each other into a set of behavior, or you're like this and I'm like that. It's more a tool for language for better partnerships. So something like StrengthsFinder, which I've become a coach for, or Enneagram personality test, those are great communication tools, essentially. So I think we're coming in a time, again, this is my context. I like to go back in time and
tell
think
us
about
what you have learned. Tell us what you've observed.
Yeah. So looking at where we're at right now in humanity, just from the little tiny bit that I understand, I do spend a lot of time thinking of origin of humanity and spirituality and what are we responsible for as human beings in the world today. I think in everything I've studied or looked into or learned, I believe that we're in a time where we need to understand the human condition the better, the most. Thank you. And in that means we need to know and be in touch with ourselves really well, and we need to be able to explain ourselves really well. And that means we need to be emotionally intelligent the most now in this time of history, because we need to be in touch with what we feel and why we feel it, and explain why we feel what we feel.
Yes, okay, I'm exploding. I don't want to interrupt, but it's just, you've just nailed something that has come out and totally wasn't expected. Why would I even try to understand you?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, tell me if this is true. I'm thinking what's giving you confidence is that you have grown in your understanding of yourself. Yeah. And I think the opposite would also be true for a lot of people. If I can't even understand me, how the H-E double hockey sticks,
how am I going to understand you?
Am I going to try to understand? And so you've had huge breakthrough in your ability to understand yourself, and then you're going, well, then I could probably understand someone else.
Yeah, because from a very young age, I disliked myself. I thought I was too much. I was told I was too much all the time. I asked too many questions. I was too overpowering in some of my behavior, and I started to feel like there's something wrong with me, which is, I think every human being is born into that sense of sacred wound. There's something wrong with me. We all kind of have to wrestle with that feeling, like I'm not like the others, or something's not quite right in me. And I think as you heal from that wound in life, and I think that's probably for another podcast, to how to heal well, but as you heal through that, you start to understand what is actually right with me. A lot of the mentoring I do, I end up asking the question, what do you think is right with you? Because so much of the mentoring is focused on what's wrong with me.
People would feel more comfortable talking about what's much more articulate. Yeah. It's like, I can paint you a picture of what's wrong with me.
Yeah, and I love kind of going, is this something that's wrong with you? Or is it possibly something that's right with you that you haven't realized? You don't know what to do with what's right with you because you haven't acknowledged that this is what's right with you. So me asking question is not wrong. It's what I do with it that could be wrong. Is asking too many questions could be wrong. Is my behavior that's not in check, character development, maturity, all these things. That becomes actually what's right with me is that I ask questions and I'm curious. And what's wrong is when I use that not for the benefit of the other, because I have insecurity. And so coming back to the question in terms of the personality test and everything that I do, the more I engage in those personality tests for myself and with you, with my team, because we have a team and we make sure everybody does these personality tests, the more I do that, the more I find like I settle with these tests as communication tools for talking about what's important to me and understanding what's important to them.
Yeah.
And so
that's the core. It all points back to what do you value? What's important to you?
Yeah, the modality itself, the tool itself, Enneagram, Strengths Finder, personality, the DISC test, all these things. The modality itself is just something that I reach for and I go, tell me more about you. So would you describe it this way, DISC personality? Or would you describe it this way, what your core motivation is, Enneagram? Or would you describe it this way, what's right with you, Strengths Finder?
Yeah.
All these personality tests, they offer a different language tool for a part of what's important to you, a part of who you are. And
what are you afraid of?
Yes.
Which is a major one as well.
Yeah.
Because that's a big part of what's motivating anybody at any particular point in time.
What are you ashamed of? What are you afraid of? All these things.
Yeah. I'm looking over your shoulder on our wall. Cora's got all the members of our team and all of their Strengths Finder reports up there, so it's a constant reminder to us.
And when we're talking as a team, or when you and I are talking, I can refer back to it and go, right now, is this a strategic time for you, Matthew? Which is one of the things I don't engage with really, really well, and I find a little bit overwhelming because I'm not very strategic in the way that I operate. And so when it's a strategic time, I want to be able to have that exchange of communication. Are we entering a strategic conversation right now? Just so that I know I can be warned, and I'll let you know how much emotional energy I have for it.
This is a great thing. So okay, so let's unpack that, and then maybe we wrap it up there.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of, okay, so I'm a strategic thinker, which means I'm constantly trying to figure out how to get around obstacles.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes that gets me in trouble because what really needs to happen is something just needs to be confronted straight up, right? Cora's gifting. She always wants to just confront straight up, what's actually going on here. That's a good day for you, But so you can see how these things could be at odds.
Yeah.
So we would come into our weekly planning meeting with, I want to look at how we get around obstacles. Cora wants to go straight through them, head on. So, but because we haven't articulated that, I'm just naturally expecting she's going to show up wanting what I want, and exactly, and she's going to expect me to show up. So which one of us is right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you know what we did? We decided we're having two different meetings.
Yeah,
we have a strategic meeting,
that's right.
and then first. We have the confront straight up meeting that Cora leads, and I totally rock and roll with, and then we have the strategic meeting where we're figuring out, and that has it's just a tiny little change, but completely changed the way we partner.
If we can unpack that quickly on how we came to this conclusion, is we did do the Strength Finder test, and that helped us a huge amount. One of the top strengths that came out in my report is I have belief, and one of your top strengths was strategic. And so obviously you're going to want to strategize. What are the 10 ways we can go about something, and let's think through each one and which one is the best.
I have to know we've considered every single option possible. So I'll bring up an option, and you're like, what? But why would we do that?
I don't need to.
And I'm like, I don't know if we should do it, or I don't even know if it's a good option, but it's worth considering because it's a possibility.
Whereas the belief theme, in a mature way, should go, definitely consider someone else's idea of how they should do things, but the belief things comes already loaded with conviction about what they think is the best way to go. The considering was 10 years ago. I didn't really need to consider this stuff. I just already know what I really think is right here. And so obviously we're going to approach circumstances and decision in a very completely different way. But now we have that language tool. Now I can go...
And we do things differently.
Yeah,
I do my strategizing.
Yeah.
And then I show up with clarity.
That's right.
So it's not just like airy-fairy, we understand each other. It's like we understand each other.
There's some work to do.
And then we alter our behavior accordingly.
There's some work to do because it's not always good to just go by my conviction either. Sometimes I have to kind of allow for a strategic process. And I do enter meetings with a strategic outcome in mind very carefully, but I do enter them, and it's important for me to learn to strategize and to let that rub off me. And I think over the years it has. I just think naturally I'll never think that way, but I can appreciate it and welcome it when it's necessary. I can see when the strategic thinking is necessary. And often I'll say, I think you guys need to have a strategic meeting about this.
And what about
Let me know when you're done and I can benefit.
And the comment, because what was it, 2 weeks ago, we had an entire week
Yes.
of strategic meetings.
Yes.
And then at the end of the week, I looked at you and I was like, I really appreciate what it's cost you emotionally to be a part of all these strategic meetings. And I was so surprised. You told me like 3 times. You were like, thank you so much for recognizing that.
Yeah, it meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
It meant a lot to me. Let's say it's getting into that meeting knowing that you will fully be drained at the end of it. And you're already feeling a little drained from life and having 4 kids and
like
all
going
your
into a meeting where I know you are going to want to just absolutely
be sure of something.
Like drill into like that,
what are we sure of?
and dealing with a whole bunch of issues. It's just my emotional tank. It's like I'm going to do it. But my goodness, is this going to cost me?
Because positivity is also one of your main themes. So we're talking Strengths Finder here, but there's other modalities and other ways and personality tests to find out other things, such as Enneagram will kind of tell you about your core fear and your core motivation in life. And it's a test that helps you think that through. One of my core motivation, which is really therefore very prone to feeling shame, is to be wanted, to be invited, to be not romantically desired, but to be desired to be in friendship with, desired by you, but desired in a friendship way. And if I experience rejection, it's actually extremely difficult for me. And so I've always known that about myself, but the Enneagram really helped me hone into that core fear in my life and deal with it. And also realize that my core motivation is to be wanted in partnership. So I need to think that through. And the way I go about it is that I like one-on-one interactions a lot, and I've noticed that. So essentially all the work I've done is pattern, like seeing pattern, observing pattern, and not locking that in upon someone, but inviting someone into a conversation about, do you notice those patterns too? What do you think those patterns have to do with in your life? And therefore, if we talk about it as something that really does describe you, does that feel comfortable? And now I can better work with you. And that's been great. And I'll say to finish that I had someone who came into so I do strengths coaching sessions. Strengths, it's called Strengths Network in New Zealand, but it's from Gallup. It's a Strengths Finder in the US and other places. And someone came into a session and they were very reluctant. Somebody asked them to do this session as part of their workplace. And they came into the session pretty reluctant, going, I really dislike these things. I really don't like it. And I had to build trust with them, going, well, tell me about you. Tell me about your life. Tell me about who you are. And I'll tell you about me and what I do. And then at the end of it, you get to tell me if you want to keep going in this session, because I don't want to force anything on you. And they eased out. There, as a top theme, had a theme of relator, obviously. They need to relate well one-on-one to feel trust in a relationship. So that was what they were bringing into the session. They were not sure they could trust me. And they felt really uncomfortable with the idea of opening up to a stranger they don't know. And so as we built a better relationship and then did the session, then later on they said this was a really, really helpful conversation because they understood themselves a bit better. And that is what they got out of the session. So I think it is possible that we dislike these kind of personality tests and strengths finder tests and all that. We dislike them because we're afraid that there's going to be judgment, or we're going to be confined into needing to perform in a certain way for someone else. But that's not the point of these kind of things. Really, the point is to understand each other better and talk about it.
Well, even that is just an interesting thing to unpack, because it's not something I can connect to. Like, I've never felt that before. I've never felt like, oh, don't box me in. I love personality tests. I'm just like, bring it on. Sounds fun. But even that for me, but again, it's really such a powerful way of dealing of getting rid of judgment in a relationship. Because it's like someone who is has been raised to be racist, having to deal with developing an actual friendship with someone from that category of person. It's like it just deals with that judgment, because you can't, the love and the bitterness and judgment, they just can't coexist. That's right. You know what I mean? And so as the understanding grows, that it overtakes that judgment as you get to understand why somebody's doing something. And it's a beautiful miracle really,
It
that
is.
happens in the heart, I think.
Yeah, and I would definitely say you don't need to become a coach in all
Yeah.
these personality tests.
No.
Just start with asking questions.
Yeah.
It start with having rhythms of connection.
So
you know?
so we talked about strengths. I'm just want to get really practical here for everybody. So you talked about, Strengths Finder is a helpful one. Enneagram.
Yeah.
People can just jump online and do that, right?
Yeah. It's a test. There's different with Enneagram. There's different websites that offer a proper test.
Yeah.
The one that I've done is called IQ9, but I recommend. But
yeah, cool. And then you talked about setting rhythms of connection, where it's the purpose of that time as a family or with your team. Where we're gonna create some space to be able to
a simple
hear
question
each
could
other.
be, what do you value most in life? What's most important to you in life? And somebody's gonna start talking and tell you chilling out and not stressing is the most important thing for me in life. Oh, okay. So when I'm coming with my energy, my intensity, it triggers you, and now I get it. Like you value peace, and I value intensity and movement forward.
So essentially, you're really thinking about, how do I create a context that's judgment free? Essentially, where people where there's still some people are, everybody needs to submit to some guidelines around not being rude to each other. You know what I mean? But with that, and that's part of creating a safe space. So you're thinking that through. How can I actually create a space where the deeper layer of truth? Because you can be next to somebody, you can work next to somebody for 10 years and not know them. You sit next to somebody at church for 20 years and not really know them. You might even be married to somebody for 50 years. And
you've just coexisted and survived rather than just...
So you're creating a space for those deeper things to come to the surface. What's important to you? What are you afraid of? What are you feeling? Powerful questions to ask.
How can I best help you with what you're feeling? Is there something I'm doing that makes it harder? All these questions are just great.
Takes courage,
because then you hear some things you're a bit afraid to hear. But that's for another podcast, or that's for you to do the foundation course if you're really wondering, how can I have such conversations? There's going to be a lot to it, but if you're willing to go there, it's quite amazing. Okay,
awesome. Hopefully you found that. I'm hoping that you found that inspiring and encouraging, and also have got a few ideas as to what you could do to get started, or to move forward in understanding the people that are most important to you. Because the more you understand them, the more fun it's going to be to love them and to partner with them.
That's right.
And the less tempting it'll be to judge them. Alrighty, friends, thanks for joining us, and thank you, my darling, for helping us, for shedding some light on that stuff. Really appreciate it. See ya.
See ya.
We hope you found the conversation and stories on today's podcast helpful and insightful. If you want to go deeper, Restoring Connections offers online courses that cover key topics like personal responsibility, proactive care, powerful communication, and healthy boundaries. Go to www.restoringconnections.nz for more information. This podcast is funded by generous supporters from all over the world. Please consider supporting by going to the Restoring Connections website and hitting the Contribute button. By partnering with us, you're helping to provide mentoring, workshops, and training to others who are also restoring their connections.